Hi everybody, this is Kyle from Icon Poly. One of the things we do here is that we make art project sculptures. Now when I say art project sculptures, I'm talking about sculptures that people put around cities and communities, and then they paint them. The local artists will paint them. So we might do 20 of a specific sculpture, like there's a big boot right beside me, and there's a javelina over here. And send those to a community, and then the local artist will paint them and embellish them however they want. And then they are displayed throughout the community. So during those projects, we get the opportunity to work with each and every artist, and some of them have questions. So what we thought we would do is we thought we would compile those questions. I have them right here, and we'll answer those questions on what they do. Okay, for any of you that are painting a big fiberglass sculpture and you want to ask a question, if you need to, then feel free to ask and we'll try to answer it. So the first question we get a lot is, what is the best brand of paint to use? Well, there are several different good brands out there. We highly recommend acrylic paints. And when you're looking for an acrylic paint, you want to look for acrylic paints that have a really high amount of acrylic resin, like preferably 100%, and also natural pigments. Do not use acrylic paints that have synthetic pigments. They will fade. So use acrylic paints that have natural pigments. I'm going to give a shout out to some good brands. Some good brands are Chroma paints, but stay with their mural paints. They have a line of mural paints that are made to paint murals. Those work great on these art project pieces. Golden has really good paints, and so you can look at those brands. And then Nova has a really good line of acrylic paints. So just any quality brand of acrylic paint, but you want to stay with an acrylic paint that has natural pigments and a high amount of acrylic resin, and preferably 100% resin. The next question is it important to sand the sculpture before painting? The answer to that is yes. Now you don't have to sand it vigorously. You just need to sand it to clean the surface. You can clean the surface with other substances, but when you put other substances on there, it can affect maybe the primer. So the best way to clean it without using a substance is go over it with like a 220 grit sandpaper. That's also going to create some abrasion on the surface, and it's going to allow your paint to stick a little bit better. So yes, we do recommend sanding the entire surface of the piece before you start painting. That is to clean the surface. A lot of times you'll have oils or stuff like that from people handling them. So by sanding that'll clean that off. Now after you sand the sculpture, what you want to do is clean the surface. Now, again, don't use anything harsh. And what we like to do is just blow it with some high pressure air to start with, and that'll get the majority of the dust off. And then take a damp cloth, like a microfiber cloth or something like that. Not soaking wet, just a damp cloth, and then that'll pull the rest of that dust off there. And then as soon as it's dry, you'll be ready to paint. The next question is, can I glue glass to the surface? There's a lot of people that do mosaics on these kinds of pieces, these fiberglass sculptures. And yes, you can glue glass to the surface. You can also glue mosaic tiles or ceramic tiles to the surface. So that is a possibility. One thing you want to do is prep the surface correctly. If your surface has a primer on it already, you want to remove that primer. You do not want to stick the glass to the primer, because the glue or adhesive that you might use might attack the primer and release the primer from the surface. So you want to then sand in all the primer off that surface before you start gluing tile or glass or anything to that surface. The next question is, what glue works best for attaching glass? Well, that one's a little tricky. Because when you say glass, it can be a lot of different things. Glass tiles, just broken glass, and it can have a different surface on the back of it. So what we recommend is a mosaic adhesive. Now, when you're using a mosaic adhesive or any adhesive on these pieces, remember that most of them are going to go outside. So you need to use an exterior grade waterproof adhesive when you stick any mosaic tiles or glass to the surfaces. Do you recommend using grout? The answer is yes. The grout will seal all the gaps between any of the mosaics or glass that you have. Now when you're using grout, stay away from any sanded grout. It will not expand and contract with the sculpture as well as a flexible grout. So look for an exterior grade acrylic flexible grout. Next question is, what tools do you use to cut into the icon? This one's interesting because we get this one a lot. People want to cut it for some reason or another. They maybe want to install something or create a little shadow box in it or something like that. So the material we use can be cut with a lot of different tools. Now, we've developed a process where we make a piece that is a lot more friendly to the artist than some pieces that other companies might provide. Ours have been designed with the artist in mind. So with ours, that's one of the things we kept in mind is you might want to cut it. So with ours, you can use a reciprocating saw. You can use the new vibrating saws like a Fine or Dremel even makes one now. Bosch makes one. There's a lot of different ones. They have a blade on the front that has an ultrasonic vibration to it. You can also use that as a sander as well. That tool works well. Dremels work good if you're going to carve into the surface or something like that. They work well as well. But you can cut with just about anything on our pieces. Now, on some of the other pieces, you'll have to do some testing on that, and they may be a little bit weirder when you cut into them, but those tools should work just fine on those as well. Next question is the icon hollow or solid? All the icons we produce are hollow. They have a wall thickness of 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and the rest of it is hollow. So even if it's like an 8-foot boot, like the boots right beside me here, they only weigh about 100 pounds. So all those are hollow, and things can get inside of them and all that stuff, but they don't weigh very much. Can I use glitter paint? You can use glitter paint, but what you need to watch out for is glitter paint where the shards of the glitter actually stick up above the surface of the paint. You want the paint to lay as flat as possible, have really small glitter in it. You need to keep in mind that this is a multi-step process, and you're going to clear coat those at the end. If you have little shards of heavy glitter sticking up, then that's going to cause the clear coat not to work as well as it could if everything was lying nice and flat. So you can use glitter paint, stick with paint that has very small glitter in it, or make sure that the glitter in the paint is laying flat when you put it on. The next question is, does the icon have to have clear coat over it even if it is not being put outside? And the answer to that question technically is no. If it's not outside and you're using good quality paints, no, it really doesn't have to have clear coat on it. However, practically, yes, because you don't know if that thing is ever going to be displayed outside, or you don't know if it's going to be displayed inside in front of a large window with the sun beating in on it. So a clear coat over the top is a UV protectant as well as a weather protectant. So yes, you need to put a clear coat, top coat on your piece when it's done, or hopefully if you're working with a project that's already arranged that, you need to get it to the person that's applying that top coat, clear coat. Okay, next question is, what is the best brand of clear coat to use if I want to brush it on? Most clear coat that we highly recommend is sprayed on. It's sprayed on with an HVLP gun. It's an automotive grade clear coat. We highly recommend that. In some cases, it is not possible to do that. If you as an artist are required to put the clear coat on, maybe you don't have the facilities to spray or the equipment to spray, or you just don't like to spray, and that's fine. There are a couple products out there that you can use as a clear coat, an exterior grade clear coat. And one of them is frog juice. Sounds funny, but it's an acrylic-based clear coat that you can brush on. It's made pretty much for the sign industry to clear coat signs. Another one is a Clear Shield product. And again, it works the same as the frog juice, only it's the name of it is Clear Shield, and it is also available through the sign industry. That's another product that you can use, and you can brush it on as well. And either one of those products work fine, and they really don't put off a lot of bad odors or anything like that. So they're a pretty good product to use. What brand of clear coat is best if I want to spray it on but do not have an HVLP gun? So that's a good question. Like we said, we really like the automotive grade clear coats, and they're all almost all of them are urethane based. So if you want to spray clear coat on but you don't have HVLP gun or the equipment to do it, there is a brand of product out there. There are several out there, I guess, but the one that we highly recommend is called U-POL. U-POL, and it's called U-POL Clear number 1. It comes in a great big, I don't even know how big the can is, but it's an oversized spray can, and it has a fan tip on it. So you can apply it almost like if you're using an HVLP gun, and it works very good. The only thing that you need to be careful about is you really do need to wear a respirator mask or something like that so you don't breathe it in as you're spraying it. But it's not really bad odor. It's a one-part product, so it sprays right out of the can, right over your paint, and it's really compatible with your acrylic paints. It works very good, and you end up with a really nice piece as long as you put on enough coats. Do I need to sand the surface before I decoupage with paper? Well, we don't recommend decoupaging these with paper. These things do go outside, but some people have done it successfully, and some people have put on material, cloth, they've used paper. But here's what you need to know. When you put paper on, one, yes, you do need to sand the surface. You don't really want to put it over the primer that's there, so you kind of want to get down to the meat, so you want to sand all the primer off. And then once you do that, then you need to lay down like a primer coat of the adhesive that you're using for your paper, and then saturate your paper and put it on there. When you're all said and done, you need to apply about 5 coats of your decoupage adhesive over the top of that, and then that can be clear coated. That's really the only way that you can protect paper when you're putting it on these. And it's been done successfully, and it's lasted a long time outdoors, but you just gotta really be meticulous and pay a lot of attention. But yeah, the question was, do I sand it before? And the answer is yes. Okay, what's the best glue or adhesive to put paper on my icon? Okay, the best glue adhesive is pretty much Mod Podge. The product Mod Podge works pretty well to do that. Again, you need to sand the surface. You need to prime the surface with a coat of Mod Podge. Then you need to saturate your product with Mod Podge and put it on there, and then coat it again with Mod Podge. When you're done, you need to apply at least 5 coats of your material over the top to seal that paper. Okay, the next question is, what adhesive do I use if I want to attach something? Okay, we just covered the paper, but we're not talking about paper, we're talking about other objects, more weatherproof objects. So the best adhesive to use is a structural urethane adhesive. Now, structural urethane adhesives can be used to build up stuff or whatever, but they also attach things very well to art project pieces. So you want to use a structural urethane, or you can also use a structural epoxy. There's a lot of different brands out there, and a lot of them are really good brands. And we're going to put down in the description below links to some of our favorite brands that we use. But we highly recommend structural urethanes. Structural epoxies can work as well. What kind of primer is on the icon? Well, that's simple. The icons are covered with a white acrylic exterior grade primer. When it gets to you, it's sandable and paintable with about anything that you want to put on it, and that's why we use it. Okay, next question. If I need to reprime the icon or an area, what primer should I use? The primer that you should use is an exterior grade acrylic primer. If you sanded the primer off, if it got scuffed, anything like that, you just want to use an exterior grade acrylic primer, a quality primer, and there's a lot of companies that have those out there. Also, if you're using acrylic paints, you can use a gesso on the surface as well. Just make sure you prep the surface well, sand it, get anything off of it, and then reprime it. Then let it dry good before you repaint. Okay, we're getting close to the end. We're on our last page. And this question is, can I use paint markers? The answer is yes. We highly recommend acrylic paint markers, and there are acrylic paint markers out there, but you need to be careful. We don't recommend anything but acrylic paint markers. If you use something other than acrylic paint markers, it may cause you issues. We know acrylic paint markers work when you're using acrylic paints. We know that system works well. We know it accepts a clear coat well. So we say yes, you can use acrylic, or you can use paint markers, and we highly recommend acrylic paint markers. Another trick that you might do that some artists don't even know about is there are fine tip bottles that you can use with the paint that you're already using. So if you're painting with acrylic paint, there are these bottles, they're fine tip and fine line bottles. So you fill those up with paint, you screw the top on, it has a fine tip, and you can use it to line stuff out with a nice fine line and draw. It's kind of like writing with an old ink pen. And it works very well. And once again, we're going to put some links below where you can get those products. Okay, next question. Can I use a Sharpie marker for fine line areas of my icon? The answer is only if you want to redo everything afterwards. So really the answer is no, because the inks in those markers do a few things. One, they can attack the surface and release, even go down and release the primer. Two, it might look all really nice and cool and everything, but as soon as you clear coat it, it's going to run or bleed. So you do not want to use permanent markers to fine line anything on one of these icons prior to it being clear coated. Okay, next question. What can I sculpt on my icon with? That's an interesting question, and we get that once in a while. Whenever you sculpt on these icons, you have to remember they're going to be out in the public, so you want to make sure that whatever you put on them is very durable. So we recommend a product called Epoxy Sculpt. Epoxy Sculpt is a two-part epoxy clay that you mix together, and then you can sculpt on it. It's available online or at art stores, but again, if you're going to sculpt on one of these, it's an exterior grade product called Epoxy Sculpt. That's what we recommend that you sculpt right on these with. Now, that's a follow-up question is how do I attach sculpted elements? Okay, so if you're going to sculpt on it, you can kind of try to depend on just the epoxy sculpt sticking to the surface, but what you want to do is wherever you're going to sculpt on it, you want to remove all the primer. So you want to take all the primer and use like an 80 grit sandpaper and sand it down to the surface. So take all the primer off where your sculpted element's going to be. And then when you have that off, we recommend using some all-purpose coarse threaded screws and drill a pilot hole into the piece wherever your sculpted element is going to be and run a few of those coarse threaded screws in there. And then when you're sculpting on it, you want to encapsulate those screws in whatever you're sculpting on. So what that does for you is you not only get an adhesive bond, you get a mechanical bond. So the epoxy sculpt itself will provide an adhesive bond, but it is a paste. So it really doesn't get down into all the fine abrasions on the surface, so it doesn't stick the best because it is a paste. It was a lot thinner product, it would stick, but it is a paste. So we highly recommend a mechanical bond to go along with that adhesive bond. That way both of them have to fail before that piece comes off of there. So use epoxy sculpt and use some screws or fasteners in the piece to actually provide you with an additional mechanical bond rather than just the adhesive bond that the epoxy sculpt provides you. Okay, that's all the questions we have. I want to thank you for watching. All the products that we mentioned are going to be linked down below in the description. So if you found something interesting, go ahead and smash the like button. Subscribe to our channel if you're going to be painting a lot of these things. We're going to show a lot more stuff later on. But again, thanks for watching and have a good day.